Hi everyone.
My wife cheated on me, and I got revenge by sleeping with all her friends. Sometimes life hits you in the face when you least expect it. You live, trust people, make plans for the future, and believe that the person next to you feels the same. But when that trust is broken, and you realize you've been deceived by the one you trusted most, what then? It's not just betrayal, it's a disaster that shatters your soul. My name is Jason, and this is the story of my revenge. A revenge I carefully planned after finding out that my wife Chloe was cheating on me. I'm just an ordinary guy, really. I fell in love with Chloe when we were young, when everything still felt possible. We were full of dreams, thinking the world was ours for the taking. We'd been together for 5 years I thought were perfect. I busted my ass every day, working, saving, building a life for us. I thought I was doing it all for the both of us, but all of that, it crumbled in one stupid moment. Everything fell apart in the most ridiculous, absurd way. I had planned this family photo shoot, a surprise for her. I wanted us to capture this moment, a snapshot of our happiness to hang on our wall. A stupid happy couple, right? But the photographer, he made a mistake. He sent me some photos he'd taken the day before by accident. And guess what? Chloe was in them. But she wasn't with me. There she was in a park, laughing, wrapped around some other guy. I remember just staring at my phone, the blood draining from my face. It was like a punch to the gut, like someone had ripped the floor from under me. I couldn't breathe. I kept zooming and thinking, maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, hoping I was wrong. But there was no mistake. It was Chloe, and she was happy with him. I sat there for God knows how long, staring at the screen, trying to understand how everything had just been a lie. My world had shifted in one moment, and I hadn't seen it coming. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. What do you even say to that? I sat there with the photos, my hands shaking, my heart racing, feeling like I was going to throw up. I thought about calling her, asking her what the hell she was doing, but what would that even solve? So I kept quiet. I pretended nothing had happened. I had to. Chloe went on with her day, completely unaware that her little secret had just blown up in her face. She came home, smiled at me, kissed me like nothing was wrong. She even asked me how my day was, the same routine we'd done a million times before, except now I was faking it. I was looking at her, wondering how long she'd been faking it too. The hardest part? Trying to act normal while the images of her with that other guy kept replaying in my head. Every smile she gave me, every "I love you" felt like a punch in the gut. But I didn't let her see any of that. I needed time. Time to think, time to plan. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her soft breathing, the way she curled up next to me, it all felt like a lie. I could have screamed. I could have shaken her awake and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed quiet. I knew if I was going to get through this, I needed to be smart. I needed to think carefully about my next steps. I wasn't going to be the guy who explodes in anger, throwing accusations, and starting a screaming match. No, Chloe wasn't going to get off that easy. I was going to make her pay, and not just with a breakup. I wanted her to feel everything I was feeling. I wanted her to lose everything. For the next few days, I carried on like everything was normal. It was hard, though. Every time Chloe smiled at me, every time she laughed or talked about our future, it made me want to scream. But I swallowed that rage, buried it deep inside, and played my role perfectly. She had no idea. I watched her more closely, now noticing the little things I had never paid attention to before. Her late nights at work, the sudden trips to see friends, the way she seemed glued to her phone more than usual. I started to wonder how long this had been going on, how many lies she'd told me while looking me dead in the eye. I didn't let her see any cracks in my armor, though. Every morning I kissed her goodbye, went to work, and came home like I always had. But inside I was a storm waiting to tear everything apart. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I had everything ready. Not until I could take everything she cared about and burn it to the ground. And that's when the plan started forming. It wasn't enough to just leave her. No, Chloe had to feel what it was like to lose everything. I knew her well, better than she probably knew herself. The one thing that mattered most to her besides me was her tight-knit group of friends. Emma, Madison, Olivia, they were her lifeline. They'd been through everything together since childhood, practically sisters. Chloe relied on them for everything: her emotional support, her social life, her sense of self-worth. If I could tear that apart, she'd have nothing left. I didn't just want to ruin her marriage, I wanted to ruin her entire life. I started small. I didn't dive in head first and tip my hand. No, I was smarter than that. I played the long game. The first step? Getting closer to her friends. Chloe had always included me in her friends' circle anyway: dinners, game nights, casual hangouts, so it wasn't unusual for me to start building my own relationships with them. But now I had a purpose. Emma was the first one I targeted. She was the easiest. Kind, sweet, and a bit naive. She was the type who loved a good listener, someone who'd compliment her intelligence, someone who would make her feel special. So that's exactly what I did. Every time we were together, I'd drop little comments about how smart she was, how much I admired her sense of humor. I could see the way her face lit up when I gave her attention, the way she leaned into our conversations, just a little more. Next was Madison. She was tougher, independent, sharp-tongued, and fiercely loyal. I had to tread carefully with her. But everyone has a weakness, right? Madison was confident, but underneath that exterior I knew she had a soft spot for validation, for feeling like someone truly understood her. So I started subtly agreeing with her more, telling her how insightful she was, how much I appreciated her unique take on things. It wasn't long before she started texting me on her own, sometimes just to share a joke or complain about work. I could feel the cracks forming. Olivia was the final piece. She was different from the others, more reserved, more thoughtful. I knew with her I couldn't just waltz in with compliments and charm. No, Olivia needed to feel like she could trust me. So I opened up to her. I shared bits and pieces of my life with her, things I'd never told anyone, or at least things I made up just for her. I told her how much I admired her calmness, how she had this peaceful energy that made everyone feel at ease. And it worked. Olivia started confiding in me, telling me things she hadn't even shared with Chloe. It was all too easy. Soon they were all texting me, messaging me about their day, their thoughts, their problems. I became the shoulder they leaned on, the ear they needed. Chloe had no idea. She still saw me as her loyal husband, completely unaware that I was planting the seeds that would soon destroy her world. And the best part, the more time I spent with her friends, the more she noticed. I could see it in the way she glanced at me when we were all together, a flicker of something in her eyes. Jealousy maybe, or suspicion. But she didn't say a word. Not yet. I was patient. I had time. Chloe's betrayal was going to cost her everything, and I was going to make sure of it. The hardest part was keeping everything under control. My emotions, my actions, my face when Chloe was near. It was like living in a twisted game of chess. Every move calculated, every smile forced. But the thing about playing chess with someone who doesn't even know there's a game, you're always a step ahead. Chloe didn't notice at first. Of course she didn't. Why would she? She thought she had me fooled, living her life like everything was normal, sneaking around with her new lover while I played the role of the doting husband. But I could see it. The little things. Like how she seemed a bit more distracted, her phone always turned face down, her excuses growing sloppier. I would ask casually, "Who were you talking to so late?" She'd laugh it off. "Oh, just Olivia," or "Madison needed advice." And I'd nod, pretending to believe her, all the while knowing exactly who she was messaging. Meanwhile, I kept working on her friends, tightening my grip on them, pulling them away from Chloe bit by bit. It started off innocent enough. I'd accidentally forget something at Emma's place, like a book or a charger, and then ask Madison or Olivia to pass it along for me. I made sure that each of them thought I was spending more time with one of the others. I would say things like, "Oh, Emma mentioned you were busy when we hung out the other day," or "Olivia said you were acting a little off recently. Is everything okay between you two?" Little by little, the doubt started to creep in. I could see it in their eyes when they all hung out with Chloe. The unspoken tension, the sideways glances. I knew they were starting to question each other, wondering if their friendship was as solid as they thought. And Chloe? She was caught in the middle. completely clueless as to why her sisters were becoming distant. One Friday night, Chloe suggested we all get together for drinks at our place, like we used to. Just a casual hangout, like old times. I agreed, of course, but I knew the night would be anything but casual. They all came over, Emma, Madison, Olivia, acting like everything was fine, but I could tell something was off. Emma didn't laugh as easily. Madison barely made eye contact with Olivia, and Chloe was tense, like she could feel the shift but couldn't place it. I poured everyone drinks, played the perfect host, and sat back to watch the show. As the night went on and the wine flowed, the conversation started to turn. First, it was Emma making a comment about Madison always being too busy to hang out. Madison fired back with something about Emma being too sensitive. Chloe tried to smooth things over, but the cracks were widening and there was no stopping it now. I made sure to stoke the fire, casually mentioning, "Oh, didn't Emma say she was hanging with Olivia last week? I thought you were busy that night, Maddie." Madison looked confused, glancing at Olivia, who suddenly found the bottom of her wine glass very interesting. And just like that, the tension exploded into the open. Emma accused Madison of always being dismissive. Madison shot back that Emma was too clingy, and Olivia, who was usually the peacekeeper, just sat there, not defending either one. Chloe tried to calm them down, but it was useless. The seed had already been planted, and it was growing into a full-blown rift between them. I watched as my wife's world started to crumble around her, and the best part? She had no idea I was behind it all. That night, after the girls left, Chloe seemed off. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone, looking confused. "What's going on with them?" she asked, more to herself than to me. I shrugged, playing dumb. "I don't know. Maybe they're just stressed out. Friendships go through phases, right?" I smiled, leaning over to kiss her cheek. It'll blow over, but I knew it wouldn't. I'd made sure of that. For the next few weeks, Chloe tried to mend things with her friends, but it wasn't working. The more she reached out, the more distant they became. Emma wasn't replying to her texts as quickly. Madison made excuses to skip their usual coffee dates. Even Olivia, her rock, seemed less interested in hanging out. I could see Chloe's frustration building. The group chat that used to light up her phone all day was suddenly quiet, and I knew it was eating away at her. She started coming home earlier, staying in more. At first, I thought maybe she was cutting back on her affair, but I wasn't stupid. I knew she wasn't done with the other guy. No, Chloe was just getting pulled in two directions, losing her friends while trying to keep up the charade with me. And that's when I realized something. She was crumbling. The strong, independent woman I'd married was unraveling, piece by piece. I wasn't even close to being done with her, but watching her slowly break down was more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. But I knew the next phase of my plan had to be bigger. I couldn't just sit back and watch her lose her friends. No, it was time to hit her where it really hurt. With every passing day, I could see it happening. Chloe was starting to feel the weight of everything collapsing around her. She wasn't the same anymore. She tried to hide it, tried to keep up her fake smile, but I knew her too well. She'd come home from work and slump down on the couch, staring at her phone, waiting for a message that wasn't coming. No more invites from her friends. No more plans for weekend brunches or shopping trips. The constant buzzing of her phone had gone silent, and I knew exactly why. It wasn't enough, though. Breaking her friendships was just a start. I wanted to push her into a place where she had no one to turn to, not her friends, not her lover, not even me. Chloe was about to learn what true loneliness felt like. The next part of my plan came to me when Chloe mentioned something in passing one night. She was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone, when she let out this frustrated sigh and said, "Madison's been acting so weird. It's like she's avoiding me." I even texted her about that conference we're both going to next month, and she barely responded. The conference. Right. Chloe had been talking about this work conference for months, excited because it was a big deal for her career, a chance to network with people in her industry. Madison was going too, and Chloe had been planning to room with her. I saw my opportunity. Maybe you should just go alone, I said casually, not looking up from the TV. You know, focus on yourself. Could be good to have some space. Chloe shrugged, but I saw the flicker of doubt cross her face. She hated being alone, always needed someone around to validate her, to remind her she was important. But the idea was in her head now, and I knew it would start eating away at her. Over the next week, I made sure to keep planting little seeds of doubt. I'd mentioned how stressed Madison seemed, how maybe Chloe was putting too much pressure on her. You don't want to overwhelm her, I said one night. Maybe it's best if you just do your own thing at the conference. It didn't take long for Chloe to latch onto the idea. One evening, she finally told me, I think I'll get my own room for the conference. Madison's been kind of distant, and I don't want to make things worse. I nodded, trying to hide my satisfaction. That's probably for the best, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Inside, I was already planning my next move. As the conference approached, Chloe became more and more withdrawn. The silence from her friends was getting to her, and she'd started spending more time at home, curled up on the couch, flipping through TV channels aimlessly. It was perfect. She was pulling away from everyone, and all I had to do was give her a little nudge in the right direction. A few days before the conference, I suggested we go out to dinner. Something nice, a break from the routine. She seemed hesitant, but I pushed. Come on, Chloe. We haven't had a night out in a while. It'll be fun, just the two of us. She agreed, though I could tell her heart wasn't in it. We went to one of her favorite restaurants, a place we used to go when things were good between us. She wore a simple black dress, her makeup carefully done, but she looked tired, like she was putting on a show she didn't want to perform in anymore. I could see the cracks, and it made me smile inside. Over dinner, I kept the conversation light, asking about her work, the conference, what her plans were. She told me she was thinking of going to the networking events alone, maybe skipping some of the social parts. It just doesn't feel the same without the girls, she said, her voice quieter than usual. I leaned in, pretending to be concerned. Maybe it's just a phase, Chloe. People drift sometimes, but they come back around. Give it time. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. The silence from her friends had started to weigh on her, and the more I reassured her, the more it fed into her doubt. I watched her pick at her food, lost in thought, and knew that the real damage had been done. The night before she left for the conference, I made my final move. I waited until we were both in bed, the room dark and quiet, before casually asking, So, what's going on with that guy from work? The one you've been spending time with. Are you still seeing him? She froze. I could feel her body tense beside me, her breath catching for just a second before she answered. What? No. I mean, it's nothing. Why are you asking? I turned over to face her, keeping my voice calm, almost sympathetic. I don't know. You just seem a little distracted lately. And I thought, I don't know, maybe you're feeling guilty about something. The look on her face was priceless. She blinked, trying to compose herself, but I saw the panic flash across her eyes. There's nothing to feel guilty about, she said quickly, a little too quickly. I just nodded, like I believed her. Okay, just wanted to check. She didn't say anything else after that. We both lay there in silence, but I knew her mind was racing. The guilt was already there, gnawing at her, and now I'd made sure she couldn't ignore it. She wouldn't be able to enjoy the conference, wouldn't be able to relax. As she left the next morning, suitcase in hand, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I'll call you when I get there, she said, forcing a smile. Of course, I replied, watching her walk out the door, knowing full well that by the time she came back, she'd be even more broken than before. When Chloe left for the conference, the house felt eerily quiet. I stood in the doorway after she drove off, watching the dust settle behind her car. A part of me wondered if she thought this trip would be a break for her, a chance to escape the mess she was slowly sinking into. But I knew better. This was just another step toward her downfall, and by the time she got back, she wouldn't even recognize her own life. While she was away, I kept myself busy. I wanted everything to be perfect for when she returned, and there was still work to be done. I spent the weekend texting Madison and Olivia, checking in with them, feeding them little lies about Chloe, things I knew would only deepen the cracks I had already created. Madison was starting to get suspicious of Chloe. It wasn't hard to plant the idea in her head. I casually mentioned how Chloe had been acting off lately, how she seemed distant, even from me. I could hear the hesitation in Madison's voice when she replied, "Yeah, I've noticed that too. She's been weird for a while now." Perfect. Olivia was harder to break. She was always the loyal one, the one who believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But even she had her limits. I started hinting that Chloe wasn't telling her everything, that maybe there were things happening behind Olivia's back that she didn't know about. "It's just strange how she's pulling away from all of us," I told Olivia one afternoon. "I thought you two were closer than that." Olivia paused. "We are, or at least we were." I could hear the doubt in her voice, the seeds of mistrust taking root. By the time Chloe got to the conference, her support system was already crumbling, even if she didn't know it yet. I spent that weekend in constant contact with her friends, keeping the web of deception spinning, while Chloe was off at networking events, trying to pretend her life was still intact. But I knew it wasn't. I knew she was unraveling. The first sign came on the second night of the conference. Chloe called me, her voice shaky. "Hey, are you busy?" "No, just watching some TV." "What's up?" There was a pause. I could almost hear her chewing on her lip, like she didn't know how to say what was on her mind. I don't know. Something feels off. I haven't heard from Madison or Olivia, and I tried texting them earlier, but they're not really responding. I thought maybe it was just me, but now, I don't know. It feels like they're avoiding me. I kept my voice calm, playing the role of the understanding husband. "I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe they're just busy." "Yeah, maybe," she replied, but I could tell she didn't believe it. There was a silence between us for a few seconds before she added, "I just feel alone." Those words hit me in a way that made my chest tighten with satisfaction. Alone. That's exactly where I wanted her. "I'm sure they'll come around," I said, my voice as soothing as I could make it. "Just give them time." She mumbled something in agreement. Then we hung up. I leaned back on the couch, smiling to myself. Chloe was starting to feel the weight of her isolation, and it was only going to get worse. While she was at the conference, I decided to dig deeper into her affair. I knew about the other guy, of course, but I didn't know everything. I had never needed to before. Just the knowledge that she was cheating was enough to push me down this path. But now, with everything falling into place, I wanted to know who this guy was, what kind of person Chloe had thrown away our life for. It wasn't hard to find out. A quick search through her social media gave me enough to go on. His name was Evan, some douchebag from her office, someone who had always been a little too friendly at company events. I remembered him vaguely from the few times we crossed paths, tall, good-looking, the type who thought he could charm his way through anything. I could see why Chloe had fallen for him. I spent the next couple of hours digging through his online profiles, piecing together who he was. Married, no kids. He had that polished, perfect life that people like to show off online. But like everything else, it was just a facade. I had a few ideas of how to use this information, but that was for later. For now, I kept it tucked away, knowing I could pull it out when the time was right. When Chloe returned from the conference a few days later, she looked different, like someone who had spent the entire trip second-guessing herself. Her face was pale, her movements slower. She tried to act normal, gave me a hug when she walked in the door, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. Or maybe she was just now starting to realize it had been there all along. "How was it?" I asked, playing the part of the caring husband. "Fine," she said quickly, brushing me off. "Just long." I watched her as she unpacked, her eyes darting nervously, her body language stiff. I could tell she was waiting for something. Maybe for me to bring up the affair, maybe for me to ask about her friends. But I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to let her stew in her own paranoia for a little longer. As the days went on, Chloe tried to reach out to her friends, but it was too late. The distance between them had grown too wide. Madison stopped responding altogether. Olivia was polite but cold, keeping her conversations with Chloe short and impersonal. I could see the frustration building in Chloe, the helplessness, and all the while, I was there, silent, watching. Her world was falling apart, and she had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. Had been patient. I had watched Chloe sink deeper into her own misery, watched her struggle to keep up the facade of normalcy while her life fell apart piece by piece. Her friendships were shattered. Her affair was hanging by a thread, and she had no idea that I was the one making it all happen. Now, it was time to take the final steps, the part where I wouldn't just watch her suffer. I'd make sure she had nowhere left to turn. I started with Evan. I did a little digging, just enough to find out the one thing that would ruin him. And there it was, something small but dangerous. Evan wasn't just unfaithful to his wife with Chloe. He had been having a string of affairs. He wasn't just Chloe's secret lover. She was one of many. Armed with this knowledge, I knew exactly what to do next. I made a few anonymous calls, first to his wife. She deserved to know. I wasn't doing this for her, but watching Chloe's lover's life implode, that was just an added bonus. I also made sure to send a little message to their HR department. Workplace affairs aren't taken too kindly in their company, especially ones involving multiple employees. Evan wouldn't know what hit him. Chloe was still in the dark, clueless that her perfect lover was anything but. I gave it a day, letting the pieces fall into place, and then I made my next move. That night, I waited until we were sitting on the couch together, her scrolling through her phone as usual, probably wondering why her friends had all but vanished. I didn't say anything at first, just kept the TV on in the background, until I noticed her fidgeting more than usual. She looked tense, like she was about to crack under the pressure she'd been holding on to for weeks. "Is something wrong?" I asked casually, not even turning my head from the screen. She paused, like she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Then, with a sigh, she said, "It's just everything. I don't know what's happening with my friends. Madison won't even talk to me anymore, and Olivia is distant. I don't get it." Her voice cracked a little at the end, like she was on the verge of breaking down. It was pathetic, really, watching her scramble to make sense of her life when I knew exactly why it was falling apart. "I'm sure it's just a rough patch," I said, keeping my tone soft, like I was trying to comfort her. "Things will get better." She nodded, but she didn't believe it. I could see that doubt gnawing at her, the realization that things were slipping out of her control. But I wasn't done yet. "I've been meaning to ask you," I said, carefully choosing my words. "That guy from your office, Evan, you still talk to him?" Chloe's face changed immediately, her expression shifting from frustrated to panicked in an instant. She blinked, caught off guard, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she tried to figure out how much I knew. "What? Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "I don't know. You used to mention him a lot. Haven't heard you talk about him in a while." Her hands tightened around her phone, her knuckles turning white. She didn't know what to say, and for the first time in a long time, I enjoyed the silence. I let her sit there in it, squirming, waiting for me to say something more. "You're acting weird," I finally said, turning to face her. "Is there something I should know?" "No," she said too quickly. "I mean, no. There's nothing. It's just work stuff, right?" I smiled, that tight, condescending smile that I knew would get under her skin. "Work stuff." She stood up then, heading toward the kitchen, like she needed to get away from me. I let her go. This was just the beginning. She was starting to feel cornered, but she had no idea what was coming next. The next day, I got a call from Chloe while I was at work. I could hear the panic in her voice before she even said a word. Jason, something's wrong. Her voice was trembling. Evan's wife called me. I leaned back in my chair, trying to hide the satisfaction in my voice. What do you mean? She knows about us. She found out somehow. I don't know how, but she's threatening to tell HR. Chloe's voice was shaky, like she was about to break down right there on the phone. I pretended to be surprised. Wait, what? How did she find out? I don't know, she snapped, her voice rising with frustration. Jason, if she tells HR, we could both lose our jobs. I don't know what to do. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her spiral. Then I said calmly, maybe you should have thought about that before you slept with him. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Chloe didn't speak for what felt like an eternity, and when she finally did, her voice was barely a whisper. What do you mean? You think I didn't know? I said, keeping my voice steady. You think I've been blind this whole time? Her words stumbled over each other. It wasn't like that. I didn't. Stop. My voice was cold now, cutting through her pathetic excuses. I know about everything, Chloe. The affair, the lies, all of it. And now, you're going to pay for it. Jason, please, She was full on crying now, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I don't care, I snapped. I don't care about your excuses or your apologies. This is what you deserve. I hung up before she could respond, slamming the phone down on my desk. The rush of satisfaction that came afterward was like nothing I'd ever felt. She thought she could get away with it. She thought she could lie to me, betray me, and walk away unscathed. But now, she was realizing the truth. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to destroy her. After I hung up, I knew Chloe would be scrambling. She was probably crying, panicking, trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart so quickly. But there was no way out for her now. I had made sure of that. I didn't call her back. I wanted her to sit in that fear for a while. Let her realize that the life she thought she could control was slipping away. Her affair was out in the open, her job was at risk, and her friends were gone. She had no one left. The next day, I got an email from her company. Apparently, HR had been informed about the affair. I wasn't surprised. Evan's wife must have gone nuclear. It wasn't just a threat. She had followed through. Chloe's affair with her golden boy had officially blown up. I could only imagine what that office looked like now, with rumors flying and people whispering behind her back. That night, Chloe came home looking like she hadn't slept in days. She barely spoke, didn't even touch her dinner, just sat at the table staring blankly at her plate. I didn't say a word. I wanted to see how long she'd last before she cracked. Finally, she whispered, Jason, I'm sorry. I didn't even look at her. You're sorry? Now. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. But I wasn't moved. This was exactly where I wanted her. Broken, alone, and desperate. Chloe's breakdown was only the beginning. Her tears didn't mean anything to me anymore. It was too late for apologies. I watched her sit there broken, begging for forgiveness, but I stayed silent, letting her drown in her own guilt. Over the next few days, everything came crashing down for her. She got a call from HR. She was suspended from work pending an investigation into the affair. I knew it would happen. Her job, the one thing she had left to hold on to, was slipping away just like everything else. Her phone rang constantly, but it wasn't her friends. It wasn't Evan. They were all gone now. She was completely isolated, and she knew it. Every night she came home, more defeated than the last, barely able to look at me. But I wasn't done. I made sure to keep feeding her lies, dropping hints that maybe things could still be fixed, maybe she could still make things right. Just enough hope to keep her hanging on, just so I could tear it away when she least expected it. It was time to finish what I started. Chloe was a shell of who she used to be, barely speaking, barely functioning. The woman who had once cheated so confidently now looked like she didn't know which way was up. Her friends were gone. Her job was hanging by a thread, and Evan? He disappeared completely. She was alone, just like I wanted. But I wasn't done. Not yet. One evening, after another long day of her moping around the house, I decided to drop the final bomb. I waited until she was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone like it might hold the answers to all her problems. "I filed for divorce," I said flatly, standing in the doorway. She looked up, her face pale. "What?" "I'm done, Chloe. I've already filed the papers." Her face crumpled, tears instantly welling up. "Jason, please. We can fix this." "I'll do anything." I shook my head. "No, you won't. You're done." "I'm done. You've ruined everything." I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing in the living room, the reality finally sinking in. Everything she thought she could salvage, gone. After I dropped the news about the divorce, Chloe didn't leave the couch for hours. She sat there, sobbing into her hands, completely broken. The once confident woman who thought she could juggle an affair and a marriage now had nothing, and I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and silence. Chloe tried to talk to me, tried to apologize, but I shut her down every time. There was nothing left to say. I was done with her, and she knew it. The divorce papers went through quickly. She didn't contest a thing. She had no fight left in her. I kept the house, the car, everything we had built together. All she walked away with were a few bags of clothes and the weight of her own guilt. Her job didn't survive the scandal either. The HR investigation revealed everything. Chloe and Evan were both fired. Evan's wife left him, taking everything, just like I planned. Chloe's life was in ruins. No friends, no lover, no job, nothing. I thought I'd feel better. I thought the satisfaction of watching her lose everything would bring me peace. But it didn't. I just felt empty.
And thanks for watching.